Hey guys, today I'm going to try a new method for firing reduced iron black paint. So if you've been following my channel for a while, you've probably seen I've been trying to figure out how best to fire reduced iron black. That is red iron oxide painted on the pot that then in the firing reduces to make black paint, just like the ancients did. And I've tried a number of different ways of doing this. So what I'm looking for is something that's successful and repeatable, something that I could use again and again, and something that potentially the ancients could have used, because we really don't know how they were firing it. So in the past, I have gotten some pretty good success. This was the last experiment I did, and as you can see, these blacks came out pretty good, and the whites pretty good too. But that's the key, to try to burn all the carbon out of the clay so that the whites are white, and then to reduce that iron to make it black. So I recently got a hold of some notes that an old replicator made years back about how he fired reduced iron black paint. And although all the notes don't make sense to me, as far as they don't seem like a logical way to go about it, he says that this is a very successful way to do it. So I've built a firing pit in my front yard, and then I made a pot that's just the right size to fire in that pit. And today I'm going to try following the instructions and see if I can get this red paint to turn black. So first, let me take you out and show you the fire pit that I made in my yard. It's my understanding from the notes that it's important to have the sides of the pit not vertical, to have them kind of slope in. I tried to make it that way, but I wanted the bricks at the top so that I could kind of seal it off and smother it. So I'm not sure if maybe adding those bricks kind of gave it too much verticalness at the top. And so this is my first firing in it, and if it doesn't work out, I can always reconfigure the pit and try again. And then I made this lid for it out of cement board. So the idea is that once I get the pottery fired, I can smother it and keep oxygen out as it cools using this cement board and some mud. So there was this pottery replicator named Michael Hawley who predated pretty much every pottery replicator in the Southwest. He was working back in maybe the late 70s, definitely heavily in the 80s. So most of his work, his body of pottery replication, was before any of the living replicators today. And so this Mike Hawley figured out a lot of things long before anybody else even started. And he's famous for making Sikiatki polychrome replicas, which, you know, he did really great. That's kind of was his claim to fame. But that wasn't the only thing he did. He also did White Mountain redware and Cibola whiteware. And I hadn't seen a lot of that until I met my friend Ronnie. And Ronnie had actually seen him fire some of this and gave me some clues. But still, there were some missing bits until I got these notes that Hawley had written himself about how he fires black on white pottery in a pit. And that's what I'm going to try to follow today. So as I mentioned before, the pit has to be kind of slope-sided, not vertical, because you want to get oxygen in there. You want to oxidize that pot to a certain extent. That is burning all the carbon off of the outside so that the whites are white. But he fires with charcoal, which is unusual. You know, most replicators are firing with wood or, I mean, maybe even dung or something, but I've never heard of anybody firing with charcoal before in a replication manner. And so this is interesting. But this also opens it up to doing it in an urban area, right? So I'm doing it in my yard because when you're firing with charcoal, you don't have a lot of flames, you don't have a lot of smoke, you know, your neighbors aren't calling the fire department. Even if they smell it or see that you're playing with fire over there, they just think you're having a barbecue if you're firing charcoal. So it's relatively safer, it's a little easier to do in the city. So it might be interesting to a lot of you, not only those of you that are trying to figure out how to do good black on white pottery, but also some of you that are in urban areas where you may not be able to just build a bonfire in your yard. Hawley smothered his kiln with a big sandstone slab. Now that's something that's hard to get where I live. Sandstone isn't readily available in nature around here. You can go buy it from a store, a piece of flagstone, but you're going to pay a lot of money for it. So I've used a piece of cement board as a replacement. The idea is that when that pottery is fully fired in that pit, you can smother it off. He would put that sandstone over it. I'm going to put that cement board over it. Kind of seal it off with some dirt or mud and then let it sit there and cool in that oxygen poor environment. This first step is just to heat up the pit and build a foundation of some hot coals that I can then stack the pot on top of. So I want a good 4 or 5 inches at the bottom of hot coals before I put the pot inside. So the pot that I'm going to fire is still inside the house. This one is just about the same size, about 6 by 6. And so I'm using this just to kind of make sure I have enough room. Because when I put the pot in the pit, I want to be able to put coals over the top, and then I still want to have room to be able to put that lid on it later. So I need to measure as I'm doing it kind of how much room I have. And so I'm just going to let this burn for a while, and then I'll go get the pot when I'm ready, and I'll start putting all the coals in. I'm trying to get relatively small coals for this part so that I can use the larger, chunkier ones on the sides, which will encourage better airflow. And now the kiln furniture that I'm using are just a few sherds. Just to verify that that'll sit there and it won't hit any coals. Okay, now that's pretty central. Now, I almost always fire pottery upside down, but the illustrations in the notes showed the pot being fired right side up, and so I'm purposely doing that. So the one thing I've changed about Hawley's notes is he said at this stage, when you put the pot in, you should put 6 inches of coals down between the hot coals and the pot, and then set the pot directly on those hot coals. And I just thought that was unnecessary. First of all, it requires a very deep pit, but all he's trying to do is give it a nice slow warm up. And I have already had this pot in my oven for like an hour and a half at 175. So it's already driven off any remaining moisture, hopefully. And I think by setting it on those sherds and allowing those coals, a few of them under it and around it quite a bit, to heat up, that does essentially the same thing. So I'm trying to outthink Hawley, and I could be completely wrong here, but it's an experiment, right? So if it doesn't work out, we can always do it again his way. But I think, from what I know about firing pottery, that 6 inches of cold coals on top of the hot is superfluous, unnecessary. Okay, so the way this is supposed to work, according to the notes, is that once the coals on the bottom are red hot, then I'm supposed to pour in the rest of the charcoal all around the pot. Fill the pit up with charcoal. The notes don't indicate any sort of cover sherds. Now, I don't really want the charcoal going down the neck of the jar. I think I'm going to put a cover sherd right over the opening. A big part of any smothered firing is timing. Knowing when to smother is a big part of it. And I'm no expert. I do know that if you smother too early, your pots aren't clean, your whites aren't good. With a reduced iron, it's harder to smother too late. With organic paint, you can smother too late and burn out the paint. Like I said, I haven't done enough of them to really be anything close to an expert on it. Now what I've got here is some mud that I mixed up earlier that I'm going to seal that lid on with. It's just clay and sand mixed, nothing fancy. I'm just going to put these bricks around the edge to make sure that we keep a good seal there. Although again, it's all new to me, so I just don't know what our chances of getting a good seal are. I mean, there could be one little crack and oxygen gets in and ruins my blacks. So many places where we could go wrong here. Okay, as you see, it's pretty hot out here. It's like 9 o'clock at night and it's, 100 degrees or something, 90 something maybe. Anyways, all done. I got this all sealed and I'll just pack it in for tonight and we'll open it up in the morning and see how it did. I have fired a lot of pottery over the years. I've had lots of successes, but I've also had lots of failures. and I have learned a little from each of those firings. If you want to learn to fire greenware pottery in an open outdoor fire, the best advice I can give you is to get out there and fire a lot. Like about every day for a year would be just about perfect, because experience is the best teacher. That's exactly how I learned to fire like this, because while I had help learning some things about making pottery, I was pretty much on my own as to firing. So trying different things and making mistakes were my best teachers. Fortunately, you don't have to fire hundreds of times to learn to fire well anymore, because I have distilled my years of experience into a handy online masterclass called Outdoor Pottery Firing 101. So you can benefit from all of my mistakes without having to make them all. Sure, you can learn a lot about firing just by watching my YouTube videos for free, but the masterclass is much more detailed instruction, covering all the tricks and different methods. You can learn to fire pottery while sitting on your butt. The ancient potters would never believe how easy we have made it. The link to my class, Outdoor Pottery Firing 101, is on the screen and down in the doobly-doo if you want to learn from my mistakes. There are some cracks in the top of the cement board this morning that weren't there before, so that's interesting. I don't know if the heat must have caused that cement board to crack. We'll see when we get inside of there. Oh, look at that. Just as dark as can be. Lots and lots of carbon in the surface of that pot. And the red didn't even reduce. So the red stayed reddish and the white turned black. Complete failure. All right, so if you go back and watch some of my previous firings where I was doing reduced iron paint, none was as terrible as this. None. I've gotten some where it's a little on the reddish side or where it's a little gray. I've never had one this terrible. So this was abject failure, and I really have no idea at this point what went wrong. I followed the instructions pretty closely, except that I didn't put that 6 inches of coal at the bottom. But I just don't see how that 6 inches of coal at the bottom would have changed the outcome here. Why didn't that iron reduce? Too much oxygen? The pit was leaking? I have no idea. It didn't get hot enough? It's clinky, so I'm gonna have to give this a good think and try again in a future video, because right now I don't know what to make of this. Why is it all black? Did I not oxidize it long enough? Perhaps. One thing I have learned in trying to do this is that coals are important. Proximity to coals are important. This one had quite a few coals around it. This one was surrounded by coal. I just don't know. So if you want to see my previous video where I actually fired reduced iron paint and it came out pretty good, I'll link that up right over here. You can watch that and I'll learn something from it. Meanwhile, I'm going to go think about what went wrong here, and I will catch you next time. Thanks for watching.